On to item 8.
Mr. Bose, on the first item, we're talking about changing the revenue side and then one of the expenses. I was just wondering if there was a specific way you'd like that motion worded to make sure that we cover it.
I apologize. I think I missed almost everything you said, Tom.
Oh, okay.
Please remember, I'm like 2/3 deaf in my left
That's
ear.
okay.
Unfortunately, I got to turn to.
Is there a specific way you need or want this motion made to adjust the budgeting? Not the mill rate one yet, just the budgeting.
I would just do the simple, to reduce the amount of the current taxes by that 2.4 million and change, and at the same time to increase the state grant revenue, ECS, for the same amount. That would be
Okay.
a great motion.
Oh. Okay. All right. I'm going to move that we adjust the town revenue and the taxes by 2.4. I'm going to read the whole number. $2,453,417.
And accept an additional. And accept an additional.
A very simplified way of putting it. Is that how we want?
Does the motion need to include accepting the state revenue?
Yes, I
Yes,
would
and
I would make
to
it the
accept
same,
state
so that the
revenue.
motion by itself balances, yes.
Okay. And to accept the state revenue for, funding of the education cost sharing grant.
Moved, seconded by Councilor Shortell.
And what you're doing is you're just reallocating revenue.
Mayor?
Yeah, one thing that certainly helps support this is that the General Assembly passed legislation that prevents the governor from holding back or changing the ECS grant. That was not in place previous years. The governor is restricted now. Obviously, the General Assembly can pass another law that would release that, but at this point, the governor is prevented from using the ECS grant to adjust what money is made available to municipalities. It doesn't mean he can't change other funds that would come to the town, but he cannot change the ECS. So that helps support our, it reassures us that the money will be there.
Councilor Laffin.
Mr. Mayor, the recommendation from your office is to adjust for the education cost sharing grant and back to that $58,000 from the health insurance, not the $411,000 from the Board of Education.
This only deals with
Just
the
the grant.
ECS, the education cost sharing. The law department is indicating that certainly we can avoid spending the $58,000, which we will do, but we can't change, we can't take that out of the budget.
Great. Oh yeah, no, I'm good.
Questions, comments, Councilor Fishburne?
So, when we originally got the backup for this item, there was a letter. There's a letter with the revised item also. And I'm centering on the insurance, health insurance aspect of this. The letter from the mayor says, I just want to make sure I'm looking at the right one. So the letter for item 8 says, pursuant to procedural advice from the law department, we are recommending the attached appropriation, which amends the 2018-19 budget. The amendment appropriates the 2.4 as discussed in additional state of Connecticut funding to the educational cost sharing grant revenue line and reduces $58,657 from the health insurance expenditure line, and it goes on. So the representation at that time was that the law department made that recommendation. So I get here tonight and I find out that I've got another letter that removes health insurance aspect of this. So which one is the truth, I guess?
The one that says revised and is the later date.
So the health department never recommended reducing the health insurance expenditure?
The health department indicated that they didn't need the $58,000. At the time we discussed changing, that is, law department, I discussed changing what authority, how we would go about changing the budget given the additional money from the state, et cetera. What got lost in the process was the $58,000. I had understood that that was part of what we could adjust. Since that time, the law department has indicated, no, that is not part of what can be adjusted. And hence the revised letter and the reformatting of the change to the budget, the amendment to the budget, as well as there's a slight change to the mill rate.
So the prior representation of May 15, that the law department had recommended the reduction in the health insurance line was a miscommunication between your office and the law department. Is that fair to say?
I misunderstood, and yes.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, we'll get to other things in a little bit. So all that's before us right now is to accept the revenue, the unanticipated revenue of $2,453,417. Is that correct? That's all we're doing with this item.
Yes.
So, Mr. Bose, I sent you an email on May 9th, actually May 10th. It was the day after, and I would expect that I'm the only person who contacted you about this item, asking about the number. Could you confirm or, if appropriate, refute the above statement that we were getting that additional money? Assuming that that statement was correct, what can the town council now do to avert the imposition of what would appear to be a mostly unnecessary tax increase? And assuming that to be true, in the absence of cutting the mayor's tax increase, what does the administration intend to do with these apparently surplus funds? So that was May 10th, and I sit here almost 2 weeks later, and I haven't gotten a response. Is there a reason?
Well, the response was the mayor's first letter to you on May 15th.
Okay, so is there a reason why you didn't respond? Because as we're hearing tonight, the mayor's letter was incorrect based upon miscommunication. So I'm just concerned because, you know, I'm not only a member, an elected official, I'm also a taxpayer in this town. I mean, is that how we deal with taxpayers?
No, my assumption was you were going to get the information once we had time to analyze it, and you did. So the fact that I did not personally respond to you is probably an oversight on my part. I admit that.
Well, nobody I mean, because actually the number that I put in my email was incorrect. So
Well, we received numbers probably maybe an hour or so before I believe that email, if I remember the timing on it. And I was out for a day or so after that, coming back to those emails, made sure we had those numbers correct from one of our consultants, the CCM group down in New Haven, and then had to kind of make haste on that Monday to get it to our agenda setting meeting on the 15th, which was last Tuesday.
So if I was just a member of the public, you would ignore that member of the public and just assume that they're going to look at the council agenda also? I'm just trying to figure, no phone call?
No, I would not. No, it's a fair question. I do thank you, Vinny, but Craig, if I have to respond to you when you're getting information 2 days later anyway, that's up to date, up to that point, I'm going to make the bold assumption that, okay, this is the way that the town is answering my question. And if I hurt your feelings because I did not respond to you, I apologize. I'll apologize publicly.
No, my feelings are hurt. I'm just trying to figure out the process, because from there,
There's no process, Craig. Mr. Fishbein, in all seriousness, it's, you know, the numbers came in, a couple of days later, I had a chance to look at them because I did spend some time away. The mayor, I believe, had some type of an indication of those numbers as well, and we had a day to get those, double checked to make sure that we had them for the agenda setting, meeting of the 15th, so you folks would get that in your agenda packet for this evening's meeting.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure that fulfills your questions. I mean,
Everything was in a lot of flux. In fact, some of what we waited for was a meeting of CCM, I believe that was either Monday or Tuesday, to get final figures. I had a conversation with Jim about that, and I brought back what they were saying, because, you know, you need to be certain. At that time, I was asking, what is our assurance? What is the control on this? And that's when I found out about the legislation that prevents the governor from changing it. But there are a lot of facets to this, and I think Jim was reluctant to be saying too much for certain because we weren't certain of anything at that point.
So from there, on the same day, it was actually that evening, a agenda item is submitted to us, or to the chairman, by Councilor Shortell. And then there was discussions about who was going to be on the agenda item. And then somehow the mayor gets on this agenda item without any, you know, I don't understand how that happens, quite frankly. You know, I mean, to a certain extent, decorum, you know, people come up with ideas as councilors, as elected officials, and they sort of run to make it an agenda item so their name is associated with it. And I don't know how our names all come off of this. And it's now, I don't want to use the word hijack, but it's, the mayor's the only name.
Well, you wouldn't be the first to use the word hijack. That's okay.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, but, and I understand that, the procedure does reflect what the procedure is. However, you at least don't have your name associated with a letter that was an error.
I got it. But I have an email that was never responded to. So, okay, that's all that I have with this particular motion. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else on the council? From the public? Mr. Chardullo, what took you so long?
Paul Chardullo, 2 Bayberry Drive. I'd like to express my support for this agenda item. I think we should absolutely apply it to the tax cut. I also believe that we should move forward, not necessarily tonight, however, if you would like to make additional changes to get that tax increase rolled back completely. If I'm not mistaken, the item just before this one, didn't we just approve a budget amendment for the sewer division, which should answer the question?
For the current budget, we did. We approved, if you were listening.
Yeah, I was listening.
The budget amendment for the sewer division was for the 17-18 budget.
Okay, so all that means is that you permitted them to make an amendment 10 months after it was approved.
It happens all the time.
Well, okay, will you acknowledge then that the council has the ability to amend the budget?
But you're oversimplifying.
No.
Yes, you are.
How am I oversimplifying it?
Because if you read the charter, we're only empowered to do it if the initiation comes from the administration. And you're going to disagree with me.
I will go back and take a second look at it.
So we are prepared with an opinion from the law department because apparently or some people have taken issue with the way the agenda was written.
Well, listen, I hear what you're saying about the law department, but I have 3 issues with the charter, and I sat with the law department trying to get the input. And the feedback I got was that I couldn't get input, even though I'm a resident of the town attorney could not advise me because the town is his client. So where does that leave me as a citizen? I guess I have to go out and hire my own attorney, maybe. Whatever. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Ms. Tata?
Christina Tata, 751 North Farms Road. I just wanted to say that I find it ironic that we're discussing who would get credit for a potential tax decrease when a couple weeks ago, 5 of the 9 of you voted to cost taxpayers $470,000 that departments said they did not need. And on that same topic, I was just wondering, is there any way at this point to get that $470,000 back, the $58,000 from, I believe, it was personnel maybe, and the $411,000 from Board of Ed? Is there anything that can be done at this point, or is that a done deal?
You're going to get an answer from the law department.
Thank you.
The opinion of the law department is that it's a done deal. You cannot get it back.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Then I bring it back to the council. Councilor Letourneau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question's for the law department. So it's the law department's opinion that we can't get the $58,000 back. How is that determined?
If the budget has been set already when you rejected the revised budget that the council had recommended you adopted through the charter, the mayor's budget was approved. And we, this afternoon, advised the mayor that he could not change that insurance item that he had been in the letter that he thereafter revised. He was advised that this afternoon. And any revision that you're going to do on the revenue side, on the mill rate, is something that the mayor has to recommend and you have to approve. It can't be done by just the mayor alone. You couldn't do it as a council alone. It takes both of you to change the revenue side and the mill rate.
And is that per charter or per state statute, or is there case law on this?
That is the opinion of the law department based upon the town charter, but we also, Attorney Small was aware that the state legislature, when it cut revenue that was going to the towns, the anticipated revenue, and that occurred after many towns had adopted their budget, specifically in that legislation permitted towns to go outside their normal budget process and to in fact reduce their budgets, and it specifically allowed it in that legislation, leading us to believe that the state legislature was also of the opinion that once towns have set their budget, it's a done deal, and that they had specific state legislation that permitted a deviation.
Okay, so let me try this another way to keep it as understandable as possible. Again, is there a specific area within the budget that within our charter that addresses that we can't do this?
It is our opinion that the area of the charter that says if by the second Tuesday in May there has been no budget passed, then by default the mayor's budget is adopted. That is what the law department is basing its opinion upon.
That sounds like it could be arguable. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Morgenstein.
So a simpler way of putting the whole question. So by default, it reverted back to the mayor's budget, and in that budget was $58,000 that was not needing to be spent by the personnel department for health insurance. So on the expense side, you have $58,000 sitting there that we've been told is not going to be spent. rather than an adjustment to the mill rate, is it possible to credit that to the taxpayers?
I don't, I don't know of a process that would permit that.
And is there any way to think up a process that could do that?
Well, Attorney Small spent considerable time on this, and we have both discussed it at length, and I don't believe there's any process of which we are aware. And I just looked at Attorney Small, and she agreed with that. So.
So that sits in the fund balance account and becomes additive to that part of our budget. Can we as a body say that amount, any amount, moving forward, be moved in the next budget year back to the taxpayer as we plan our next year budget?
That's what we end up.
Right. I mean, whatever amount we take from reserves will be increased by the $58,000, so it is returned to the taxpayers. It won't be spent this year, and it will be returned through the reserves that we put into the budget every year.
We're going to apply a mechanism to that line item in the expense side of the budget so that the $58,000 will not be spent.
My understanding is that the Board of Ed is taking a similar tactic with the money. They're kind of saying, okay, I don't need to touch that. If the government side says we don't need to touch that, I would suggest that this body, at the beginning of our process next year, certainly no matter the state of affairs, say this is owed to the taxpayers.
Well, I
what
think
it's, what it's worth.
Speaking 20 months in advance, probably, or 18 months in advance, it's going to be hard to like see or start to, tier out if there's any surplus of funds. If our surplus, our budget surplus for the year ended, for example, June 30th, 2017, was about $300,000, $312 if I remember correctly. If that happened again this year, obviously $56,000 on the general government side would be part of that. You know what I mean? So it would be in there, it would be part of that final product. But during the year, mechanism that we're going to utilize on the general government side to not spend that $58,000 out of that line item, that expenditure line item in the personnel budget, is going to be applied, July 1st. Unless something obviously disastrous happens and we need to transfer funds toward a...
Well, I can tell you it will not be spent, period.
Okay, you heard him. I was trying to leave the door open to like maybe a tornado or something. Those never happen.
Thank you.
Councillor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, I also spent some time working on this, and, although some people fail to recognize, I did bring a package to this body to have a zero tax increase. And unfortunately that failed, and I don't know why people forget, but we can amend our budget, is my opinion. And I did look at the legislative discussions with regard to the language that Attorney Small looked at, and there was no discussion about them having to pass that because it was unwarranted. And I'll tell you that the reason why the change to item 8 happened was because I called Janice this afternoon and brought to her attention the $58,000 being in there. Otherwise, that document probably wouldn't have been revised. So my opinion comes from the Supreme Court of Connecticut, which I would expect that our lawyers here would have looked at in 1985. The case of Tramontano, I'm sorry. Town of Southington relied upon this just 2 years ago. And the procedure in New Haven is very similar to ours. In March and April of each year, the Board of Finance is required to estimate, so the Board of Finance sits like the mayor, to estimate the amount of money necessary for the expenses of the city for the fiscal year beginning in July, as well as the rate of taxation needed to meet such expenses. Thereafter, and this is all by charter, a public hearing on the recommended budget and tax rate must be held by the Board of Aldermen, which is the next step up, which must act thereon no later than the first Monday in June, which is even later than our procedure. It goes on to say, upon the failure of the aldermen to act by the first Monday of June, the estimates, appropriations, and rate of taxation reported by the Board of Finance shall be final. It's basically the same procedure that we have here. And what happened in this case of Tramontina was they passed their budget May 12th of 1982. On May 18, they found out that they had misestimated the revenues from the state. They also found out that a utility bill for the New Haven Coliseum was $244,000 more than they had estimated. So that's more than just state revenue. And that utility bill is akin to our health insurance situation here. They also found out that a program for services to the elderly was underfunded. And thereafter, they amended their budget. In that particular case, they increased their taxes after the date indicated in their charter. And a taxpayer sued and said, you can't charge me the higher tax because the charter is a drop-dead date. What the Supreme Court said was, the fact that the revisions were made after the date set by the charter for submitting the budget to the Board of Aldermen did not deprive the Board of Finance of its power to act in fulfillment of its duty to submit a balanced budget. It goes on to say, suppose the board neglected its duty intentionally. Would not a mandamus lie to compel them to discharge it? So they would have to modify their budget. They go on to say, on previous occasions, we have held that the acts of a public official performed at a time beyond the limit prescribed are nonetheless effective. Ultimately, they say, despite the imperative shall, which is like in our charter, which is used in setting the date for submission of the Board of Finance proposal, as well as throughout Section 58 of the charter, we are persuaded that the legislature never intended that failure of the Board of Finance to comply with this time limit should nullify any subsequent action taken. That's what our Supreme Court of Connecticut has said. The town of Southington relied upon that just 2 years ago. In addition to the case, I have the legal opinion, the letter written to the town of Southington. And I'll tell you that, you know, FOI is very important to me. And I was able to get these documents because the town of Southington posts their minutes online very well, and they add attachments. I wouldn't have those documents but for that, something that we don't do here. But I have the letter from its attorney, Landolina, to the first selectman of Southington, having to do with amendments and modifications. So, you know, in this case, I think that we can amend our budget. And I gotta tell you, if we amended our budget to have a zero tax increase, as I'm gonna propose shortly, who is gonna sue? Who would have standing to sue? Who's damaged by paying less taxes? Nobody. So that being said, I'm proposing as an amendment to the motion on the table, it's in addition to. So we have the revenue that's currently the motion. I'm combining that with the health insurance of $58,657, combining that with the Board of Education very generous give back of $411,000, I'm giving the WCI facade improvement program the $5,000 that they asked for our downtown. And then I'm taking two items out of the Public Works budget and utilizing the reserve in the cap and non-recurring that is there from projects that are done. It's unexpended, unencumbered money. We're taking 110,000. That puts us at an adjustment of 3,028,074, which my understanding from the information that we got from Mr. Bose prior to the budget situation was we needed to hit 3 million. So this should have a zero tax increase or perhaps a very slight tax decrease. And I so move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the amendment?
Your spread, if I may, Mr. Chairman, sorry to interrupt your vote. Thank you for the spreadsheet, Mr. Fishbein. There's a problem with it. You're adding 2.4 million from the ECS grant revenue and you're not subtracting 2.4 million out from taxes.
Well, that adjustment can be made. We had to come up with an adjustment of 3 million. And that's what that does. How we get there, you're gonna, I mean, that's 3 million. So, you know, you could adjust, you would adjust the first line, the second line because you're not expending it, the third line because the Board of Education doesn't need it. The $5,000 is already baked in, and the 110. So you're going to take that total amount as an adjustment to taxes. It's a decrease.
I understand what you're saying.
Thank you.
Mayor?
I just want to point out that there's not authority to do this according to the law department. Now, I don't know if, Greg, I don't know if your recitation of what the case is that unknown? Do you change your opinion at all?
No, we haven't changed.
So there.
What is the opinion based upon? There is no, I mean, I have a copy of the case. I have a copy of the legal opinion. Do you have a case?
Read the entire case, but just using how you described the New Haven case, you could have done all these things on the second Tuesday in May. It's unlike the New Haven case, which it came in after the fact from the way you described it, unless I'm understanding it wrong. You, the council, could have voted for all these changes the day you didn't vote to pass the budget. This is not something new since then.
Same thing
None
here.
of these things.
Same thing here. They adopted a budget. They followed their procedure, and then
Right, and then things changed.
Yes.
These items didn't change. You could have taken away the health insurance the day you voted on the budget. You could have taken out the Board of Education funds. You could have, I don't even understand the WCI or the Public Works fund. So, and I still have to read that New Haven case, and it sounds somewhat I'd have to read it myself, but.
I have a copy.
So comparing it to using how you described it, where things became known after they had the vote, that's not the case here. You had you had that information, you chose not to do it.
The question was whether or not we could amend our budget, and there's no.
Well,
case
I'm trying
that
to
says
fit
we
it into your fact pattern of the New Haven case. I'm just saying that's one distinction. So at this point, we certainly haven't changed our position.
So your interpretation is that what we can do or what we can act upon after our budget deadline passed according to the charter is based on new information that we didn't have at the time that we passed our budget. That's
really what we're willing to go out on a limb and say, that the charter tells you that the budget's final. That's what it says. You didn't pass the budget. The charter says the mayor's budget is final and the mill rate will be set based upon that budget. So the question is then, because the state is introducing additional funds, can you add those funds in to take away from the tax implication of that? And we're willing to say, okay, although somebody could argue you can't even do that, but we're willing to say that. But the idea that you get to redo the budget, we're not willing to say that at this point in time. We're not willing to say that you have the authority to do that. The example in the 2006, when the state of Connecticut passed the budget in 2016, several towns had already passed their budgets. The state budget gave them less money. So the state, in the law itself, gave them the authority to adjust their budgets only to the extent that they reduced state funding, not beyond that, not a total redo of the budget. They had to follow the same budget procedure. It had to be done by June 30th, and they could only reduce the Board of Ed if monies for the Board of Ed were in fact reduced, and only by the amount that they reduced it. So the state law recognized that if they didn't give you permission to do this, you had no authority to do that because no one's charter provides for such thing. That's kind of what we've been wrestling with as to what the extent of what you can do is. You had an opportunity to remove these things from the budget, you chose not to. So the budget became final. So that's kind of why we're working to give you the opportunity to pull the new state money into the budget so you can reduce the tax liability. But we're not saying that you have authority to redo the whole budget. We're just not saying that.
So, am I still up?
You can finish.
Okay, thank you. So the case goes on to talk about time is of the essence with the use of the word shall. And because there's nothing operative that happens, that it's flexible. So, once again, I don't know who's going to assert that we're doing something illegal because we're cutting taxes. I know of no law that prevents us from doing this. There's certainly no case law that prevents us from doing this. And, I think it's a viable and a live motion. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Testa.
Right now, we're discussing amending the original motion.
That's correct.
Not even voting on it yet. Okay. Well, I'm kind of torn. I mean, I'm in favor of the amendment because then it gives us a chance to vote on this. I'm torn now whether we may or not. While it may seem counterintuitive to my decision not to support these two specific cuts a couple of weeks ago, I was also not in favor of Councilor Fishbine's original attempt to reach this bottom line number because of all of the various adjustments he was looking to make. However, now the majority of these adjustments would be the amount that we're considering in the first place there, which I can't imagine any of us would be against. So I guess I would say if this is allowable, it sounds good to me. So that's that. I'm in favor of it if we can do it all. If not, we do the original. So that's it.
Councilor Letourneau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'd like to see us move this along. We have a motion on the floor. We also have an opinion from our law department, but we also have an opinion from the state Supreme Court. And I think that may be arguable at a different time, at a different place. I think right now it's maybe our responsibility to take action on this.
Chairman Cervoni, could I ask a question? Councilor Fishbein indicated that the Board of Education was willing to give up its money. I haven't heard that it was, and I don't know of any authority that you could just take it away from them. And as far as people having standing, which everybody's brought up the issue of standing, certainly the Board of Education would have some standing as to object to giving up money on the motion of Attorney Fishbein.
I did confer with Dr. Menzo prior to the meeting, and he stands on his representation, his good faith representation, that they do not need that money. They attempted to give it back to us, so I think that it's certainly viable, if that answers your question. Thank you.
Councilor Letourneau, you had the floor.
I sure did, thank you. Yet again, I get hijacked. So, as I was saying, I think the legal opinions, that's for another place at another time. And I think it's time to take a vote on these motions. Thank you.
Councilor Laffin.
Thank you. If we can adjust the budget whenever we want, or with new information, what drives us then to have to do it tonight versus allowing the legal stuff to get figured out and causing a potential problem?
I think that's directed to me.
I'm asking anybody that feels like they can answer it.
I think the timing is totally ripe now in that if we were, let's say, halfway through June, we're on the precipice of the new budget going into effect, I'd totally be in agreement that you couldn't do anything. But that's why I acted upon this the day after I found out, and that's why I was a little discouraged I didn't get communication, because I wanted to, figure out, because time was of the essence then. So I don't think we can wait on this. But once again, I don't see anybody challenging it, and I think that we have Supreme Court precedent. So, but yeah, I agree. You can't do it in August. You can't do it on June, June 29th. But we're here. I mean, even in the New Haven case, they had their dates were even after ours. So, if that answers.
Councilor Morgenstein.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right.
Councilor Laffin's
that's
not
okay. And the the law department is fine with that, or you stand by you don't think it's? And would any more time with to peruse this new case open up the possibility of adjusting the opinion? I know it was presented very quickly. I just would rather, as Councilor Testa suggested, not break the law.
I never suggested that. I'm all for breaking the law. No, I said I'm just not sure if we could.
We have no problem of looking at the case that Councilor Fishbein brought out, but, again, time does start to be of the essence. The mill rate has to go out, the bills have to go out. At this point, we stand by our legal opinion.
Okay. And then, so sorry, and Councilor Fishbein, you had said something, you acted the day after. When did you figure this out, or?
When did I figure what out? That we could do this?
Yeah.
Around May 12th, I acted on communicating with Mr. Bose the day after the legislature did what they did.
Was that a group email or that was a separate email?
I sent it to the group.
Yeah, because I didn't see that part in there about acting on it after. I mean, I saw the excess funds part from the state.
I inquired as to what the administration was going to do, what we could do. I asked all those questions.
Yeah, but you didn't cite the New Haven case.
No, I didn't find the New Haven case till after that.
All right, well, that's what I'm asking. Because a lot of this feels like, we got handed the spreadsheet now, and the New Haven case is cited now instead of, a lot of it to me feels like you kind of joked about it earlier, ironically. You kind of wanted a gotcha credit for it instead of getting it done, which had we just given this information to everybody days ago, or as you figured out, we could have figured, hashed this all out. The whole thing, it just seems, I don't know.
Well,
dirty.
I did, I'll take the accusation at what it is. I did call Janice on my own this afternoon to ask if there was some sort of legal opinion. I
You
was.
didn't tell me about the
proactive.
case.
No, I didn't.
I mean,
No,
you could have told me about the case.
I told you I was researching.
And I didn't know about, that's why, when, you're the one who told me about the 58,000, I didn't know about it, that's why I got a hold of Jerry and we told the mayor that we did not believe that he could include that, so, you know, I could have looked at the case or we both could have looked at the case.
And there was quite a few emails over the past week or so about, and I have the email chain here, you know, whether or not this was going to be a discussion item or an action item.
Yeah, but nothing about, you guys were just arguing over who was getting credit. It wasn't anything
No.
about
Action item.
New Haven and all this
specifically
other stuff.
Not credit.
Okay.
My last email with regard to that says, I really do not see a problem with a possible action being included until it is determined that such action cannot occur or the administration is unwilling to suggest the same. We're going back and forth about that. Not who gets credit, but how it's going to appear on the agenda item.
Look, I would love, as I would hope, you know, you would think that everybody up here would want to decrease the taxes. We saw that wasn't the case 2 weeks ago, but I would hope that this would be possible. It looks good. I've only had it for a couple minutes. And you know, you mentioned, you know, we all forgot about the zero tax package you presented. We didn't forget. I thought we were polite and respectful in your attempt. And I found that more on the irresponsible side versus what you've presented here now. And I would love for this to happen. I just want to make sure that we're doing it right and not just like running into a wall repeatedly when we're being told by our law department we shouldn't be doing this. And you say, who's gonna oppose this? I mean, sometimes I think that all the time. And then yet people come up to the mic, no offense you guys, and oppose things that I or we might think are common sense. You know, we had people coming up we had both sides, and you wouldn't think that at the school security hearing. And you would like, well, wait a minute, where are they even coming from in this? There are people out there. I just want to make sure that we've got all of our bases covered. And if we need to have a special meeting after a couple days of looking at this, then by all means, I'll be back here for a special meeting to eliminate the tax increase in its entirety instead of just dropping it down a couple mils from what we already raised it. I just don't want to do this stupidly. We already did this stupidly a couple weeks ago. I think we could just take our time.
No, he's got two projects here.
Cross all of our T's and dot all of our I's. We might have a better chance of doing this correctly. That's it for now.
Councilor Morgenstein.
I've almost forgotten. I think all I really was going to say is I am in favor of doing this. George Bush sent out people's $300 checks years ago, spent postage on it, so it kind of negated the whole thing. We should be reducing our taxpayers' bills and getting this done, and I support it.
Anything else from the council? Councilor Marone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This whole process, I agree with Councilor Laffin that this whole process does feel kind of ham-handed and kind of last minute. I only wish that the 5 members that had voted no last time had been a little more prudent when approaching the budget. And we didn't get to this point where now we're trying to take back the things that we already tried to take back the first time. So perhaps there's a lesson in here to be learned about how we approach the budget next year. Perhaps not just during budget season, but maybe this is something that has to occur, you know, month to month, meeting to meeting, where we look at the budget every meeting. So I can't oppose this because this is, you know, brings us to a 0% tax increase with essentially no negative to anyone, unless there's a legal reason that we can't do this. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly. Anyone in the public want to be heard? Councilor Tada? I mean, Ms. Tada?
Is it a promotion?
I do not have the power to do that. That was a misstatement.
Thank you. Christina Tata, North Farms Road. In regards to the $400,000, or I think is it $411,000 Board of Ed, Councilor Fishbein stated that Dr. Menzo had said that he would be willing to give that back. My concern or question, I guess, is does Dr. Menzo have that authority? Would the Board of Ed need to vote on that? Because if there is, I would think if anybody were to, if this if we find that this is not a legal process and somebody were to consider suing, I don't know that the Board of Ed could potentially, or parents of students in the schools maybe would be upset that that money was taken away. I don't know if they would maybe urge the Board of Ed to try to get, to possibly sue. I don't think we need another lawsuit, and I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know, and I certainly, I know all of you know that I was fighting during budget season for a tax, either zero increase or, minimal increase. But I don't know if that's something the law department can answer. Would the Board of Ed need to vote on that?
Sure.
Thank you. Roxanne McKay, 294 Ivy Street. Actually, in fact, we did vote. We've earmarked that monies. We've put them aside. Actually, Councilor Morgenstein brought that up in terms of how, in relating back to Mr. Bose, it's going to come back to you guys, though, albeit those monies are earmarked, put aside. We are not looking to spend that money, and by virtue of having it in our contingency, it is going to go back to you folks at the end of next year. So we've earmarked that money to go back to you folks. So from our perspective, the Board of Ed's already voted to not spend that money. So.
Mr. Morgenstein.
Don't have the power to do that.
Good evening, Larry Morgenstein. I just want to say that, I know that every counselor up there goes up there at budget season with it in mind. You want to reduce or eliminate any tax increase. I would encourage you all, if the conversation continues, don't be pointing the fingers at you. Everybody took a vote in good faith up there. You thought you were doing the right thing. It's not about who gets credit. It's not about who it was silly or anything. Right now you have an opportunity, and that's what this discussion should be right now. You have an opportunity to take a vote and maybe zero it out. It's in flux. You have a legal opinion that's in question, but there's also the question is it may be perfectly legal too. So the question is you have an opportunity. So let's cut through the fingers and stuff. Take a vote.
Mr. Chardullo.
Reducing their budget. Reducing their budget.
Paul Chardillo, 2 Bayberry Drive. I'd like to start by associating myself with Mr. Morgenstein's comments, and I'd like to add a couple things. One is I want to commend Councilor Fishbein. I think he's made a very good motion. I think he has done his homework, and he's done it very professionally.
I can't wait.
Third point I'd like to make is that legal opinions are important.
They don't have to reserve.
But that's what they are, opinions. The town is run and decisions are made by the mayor and the council.
Taxes, or else we have an unbalanced budget.
So I would encourage you to keep that in mind. The last point I would make is that I'd really love to see a unanimous vote on this. And I hope that this is not the end of something, but the beginning of something. Because, as I stated earlier, there's a lot of money in this town that could be allocated for better uses rather than sitting in funds and paying cash for fire trucks, etc. But I certainly support this. Thank you.
Chair, could I point out that the chairman of the Board of Ed said that that money would not be coming back during this coming fiscal year. It would come back at the end of the fiscal year, so it'd be hard to count that money since it's still going to go to.
Thank you. Councilor Shortell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a procedural question. Just if this motion passes, but it doesn't actually happen because it's illegal, then the whole thing fails? Or what? I'm trying to understand the process. Then we lose the state money, then we have to go, what do we do then at that point?
I may be wrong, but I thought you had voted to accept the state money. No.
We haven't yet voted.
Okay.
That motion is on the table, and an amendment to that motion is on the table. The motion on the table initially is to accept the 2.4 and change, million and change from the state, and then and to reduce revenue accordingly because we're accepting that money. And then the amendment came from Councilor Fishbein to take out the 411 from the Board of Ed, the 58 from the tax, and some additional money from Public Works.
So we have to actually vote on the amendment first and then vote on the whole motion. Okay, so so my question, assuming the amendment passes, not that you should assume anything, and then now we're voting on this amended motion, yeah, what happens if?
We don't really have an opinion on that at this point. That was not something that we researched. If you pass it, we're just going to have to, research what the result is.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
I think she wanted.
Roxanne?
Thank you. The only reason why I stated that it would go back at the end of next fiscal year is based on the way, we'll give it back now. We don't want the money in terms of needing it. We're just going to be stewards to hold it, frankly. It was the idea. And that was based on the direction we were given by our attorneys. If you have legal counsel, or you have a desire as an entity to make that adjustment now and take that 411 from us, fine, that's fine. But our understanding is from our attorney is that we actually need to just carry that through the fiscal year and show it as that surplus, and then you would just reduce us that amount. How you want to show it from an accounting standpoint, that's fine, but we will just, our idea is we're just going to be stewards to that money. We have no intention of spending it. So if you decide legally, you folks have the ability to make this adjustment now and take that 411 at this point, that's fine for us. We're not going to do anything with that money, no matter what. So I can't speak from a legal aspect, from an accounting aspect, how you folks want to process that, but again, we'll just be stewards to it until you have the ability for us to return it to you, if that makes sense. So I appreciate, Mr. Farrell, what you heard, but that's not my intention. That wasn't the Board of Ed. And actually, I want to state for the record, the Board of Ed voted unanimously to make this decision that we don't want to use this money. And we recognize the importance for the taxpayer to retain this money to return it back. So I hope that clarifies. I don't know if anybody has any questions, I'll stay up here, but if you folks just deem it appropriate to take that 411 now, that's fine, from Board of Ed's perspective.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, thank you, Roxanne. From an accounting standpoint, it's very easy to do, obviously, just journal entries to hold funds or something like that. But from a legal aspect of it, and I just whispered this to the mayor, if you don't act on reducing or amending the Board of Ed budget by the $411,000 tonight, we basically have an unbalanced budget. So if you're going to vote tonight to do that, as Chairwoman McKay just stated, then they're not going to see that. They're going to see the budget, then they're going to see an amended budget column, which is $411,000 less. And that's going to allow me to reduce the current tax revenue to keep the budget in balance by that 411. In other words, and the sequestering the funds is easy. We plan to do it on our end if with the health insurance as we discussed. But it's the legality of it today. You have to reduce their adopted budget of May 8th by amending it tonight to reduce it by 411, just like you're going to reduce the general government's by the 58,000 and change for the health insurance and the other changes as presented, I'm assuming by Mr. Fishbein. And then the corresponding reduction in tax revenue, and the budget will be legally in balance.
Will be legally in balance or will be legally imbalanced?
It would be in balance, it would be legal.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to, imbalanced, I get you, Mr. Cervoni. I got you. No,
Well, you know, I'm trying to avoid democracy in action versus democracy in action.
Yeah, the budget would be then in correct balance, if you allow me to change.
Thank you.
And if I may too,
Illegally balanced.
if I may impose upon the council and Mr. Fishbein to, the last couple of items for Public Works, instead of using the cap and non-recurring fund, if we don't mind changing that to using the CRRA distribution funds. It's not a really big deal, but the cap and non-recurring, we try to use for infrastructure improvements, not for vehicles per se. I don't have a problem with it going into the CRA fund at all. If you don't have a problem with that. And of course, the funds that you had planned to use from the reserves of the cap and non-recurring fund are still there. I mean, they're not going anywhere. That's, if I may make that suggestion.
Councilor Fishbein, would you consider your amending?
It would achieve the same result.
Accordingly?
I would adopt it as a friendly amendment if it does not change anybody's vote. I don't want to impact.
I can't do that, but.
I know, I don't want to impact.
I understand, yeah. I understand, yeah.
I have no problem with that, you know, when I originally proposed my zero tax increase budget on that night, I had appropriated things from that CRA fund, and that did not pass. So because that happened, I intentionally did not touch that fund.
I understand, yeah.
When I had this.
Well, I think that night it was somewhere, I have your information upstairs, somewhere around $1 million, and I think that frightened me a little bit, to be frank. 110,000, I can certainly live with.
I guess procedurally, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if this is proper. If we could poll the council as to whether or not that would impact anybody's vote?
I think we either vote or we don't vote.
Okay, so the item is as presented. I don't want to jeopardize something. I understand, but we've already been down that road. So, and that money, just so everybody understands, the $400,000 that's in cap and non-recurring is from projects that are completed that came in under budget to the credit of the town and that are unencumbered. So that $400,000 is sitting there as the CRA money is as well. So
that's correct.
Okay. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mayor.
Yeah, I think we need time for the law department to verify whether some of this is okay. I mean, I think we need to act on the accepting of the state funds, because if it's not okay, we're spending a lot of time discussing this, and certainly I'm not going to process something that is not meeting the requirements of what the charter and state laws and whatever practices are involved.
Could we table the amendment to the next council meeting and then and act on the initial motion?
I'd suggest, maybe we'll have a special meeting, give the law department a chance to look at it. I hate to wait until that far into June, but, we could have a special meeting and look at it then, but.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mayor. Because there is a reconciliation function that must occur between the assessor's office and the tax collector's office to reconcile the grand list to what ultimately becomes what we call the tax levy. Tax levy is basically the summary of all taxes once the mill rate is put into the equations, and then some adjustments made for various exemptions that are sitting waiting to change the grand list. That function takes a couple of business days. Then we have to get that, make sure that those reconcile, and get that file electronically to our bill production company, and they pay, then they create the bills, mail them out. That takes them probably, if we wait till June 13th, or based upon council action of June 12, it's probably gonna take us pretty close, because we're gonna be way down the list on their items, on their towns. So they do 90 or so, some odd towns in Connecticut. And those bills are gonna go up probably a little later than we would want. And I don't wanna jeopardize, I'm not saying they won't go out with.
This is the reason for a special meeting and not waiting till June.
Correct.
Okay, I'm good with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you could wait on all of it. If we can do it as a special meeting in the next few days, then you don't have to move ahead on the first part of it.
Even if it's like the first week of June, I think that gives us plenty of time. And I don't want to represent that bills would not go out on time and they wouldn't be delivered by, we'd love to have everyone have those by June 20. We got about a 10-day window in there. If we don't get to this until June 12, assuming that everyone agrees, et cetera, and the law has rendered their decision, then we're pushing right up against June 30th.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Are we now debating a motion to table this that hasn't been made yet?
No.
We're trying to understand whether or not it's effective, an effective way to handle the whole thing.
Or even necessary.
If that.
May I make a suggestion?
You're a.
Yes. I've got one quick question. Can we not just make the motion contingent upon approval by the legal department? And then in a couple of days, they'll come back and say, oh, it doesn't work. We could avoid a special meeting and everything reverts back. Can we not just add that simple condition to the motion? If we're going to wait for a decision to then vote on it, why don't we just vote on it contingent upon that decision?
I don't think it's a good idea to ever pass something where you're having an issue over whether it's legal or not. I mean, that is just not good procedure. We need to be all square with what we're doing and the justification for it, then pass something, and then if it's found to be, there could be facets of it that are okay and other facets that are wrong. I mean, it's not a good thing.
Councilor Laffin.
Thank you. And to Craig's comment earlier, my issue with the original amendment from a couple weeks ago was the volume of the CRA funds. So in this case, that would make sense to me. But it was just the using a third or whatever it was of the entire account that concerned me. But not that we're supposed to be polling each other. So I kind of wanted to say what the mayor and what the kind of the discussion has just been. If we can move the whole thing to a special meeting, then that's fine. Otherwise, I was going to recommend or ask if we could approve what we had kind of planned tonight so we don't lose anything. Because I don't want to then go with the amendment and then find out that we can't do it. Now it's in the middle of June or July, and then we revert back to the mayor's full and it just have it be a mess. I just want to make sure we do this right and we're not jumping the gun for the sake of making a huge splash or anything like that. That would give us an opportunity to straighten out the numbers, to get all the motions written out as they should from the comptroller, as we normally do before our big budget meetings, and to have the legal options and opinions fully explored. I'm not a fan of the contingent thing, just because then we're saying we approve of this if the people in the law department think it's okay. I would rather we make the final decision based on the facts and the knowledge of what we understand the case being, not ultimately just handing it off to them and they could, even if they can maliciously decide to accept or deny. And I would rather just kind of keep that here because this is our one job, if we have any, is this budget our important job. So I know we have a motion for an amendment, and I don't know that it's appropriate to table the entire discussion when there's a motion for an amendment on the table.
I would entertain a motion to table the amendment, but as I see it, our options are either, and the mayor did suggest that this is a possibility, if we could call a special meeting, say early next week, and revisit the whole thing, then perhaps that might be the safest way to go. And I'm with you. I think the law department is here to advise us. I don't think they want to take on the role of voting for us. So.
Yeah, the other facet of this is we don't want to keep having to recalculate what the impact of whatever we do is the mill rate. And there's so many moving parts to this. It's that's when the errors start to occur, when we're multiple times trying to figure it with different ways. So we need to deal with it at one meeting, and at this point, why don't we, I would urge you to table it, and as soon as feasible, we'll be back together and deal with it.
Sure. Is it in order? I would then, Mr. Chairman, I move that we table agenda item number 8 to a special meeting to occur within
a week,
1 week's time. Is 1 week enough?
I don't want to, I don't know what the law folks have on their work agendas, but I mean, we're good up and through probably, you know, June 5th, June 6th, something like that. So if that gives you another week to work out your schedules, we're still okay till about then.
Okay, I'm hearing we can look at 2 weeks.
Within 2 weeks.
Is there a second to the motion to table?
2 weeks is, within 2 weeks would be, give us enough time.
There being no second to the motion to table, that motion fails. I saw hands to my left, Councillor Morone.
Call the question.
Second.
Motion and a second to call the question. All those in favor of calling the question signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
None.
Calling the amendment.
The amendment gets called first.
Got it.
Councillor Laffin was opposed to calling the question. If you could note that, please.
What does that mean, call the amendment?
You have to vote. We're voting on Greg's
The whole
amendment.
thing, yeah.
Greg's amendment right now.
Yeah.
Not even.
The first roll call is on the amendment.
On the amendment, yep. Let me just get it in front of me. 1 second, thank you.
We're not even approving the motion yet.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so on Councillor Fishbein's amendment. Fishbein,
Yes.
Laffin,
No.
Letourneau,
Yes.
Morone,
Yes.
Morgenstein,
Yes.
excuse me, Shortell,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni.
No. The motion.
The amendment passes.
Yes, it does. So now we are voting on the motion as amended.
The motion as amended. Okay. Fishbein,
Yes.
Laffin,
No.
Letourneau,
Yes.
Morone,
Yes.
Morgenstein,
Yes.
Shortell,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni.
As inconsequential as it is, a vote yes.
And the motion passes.
Mayor, do we have anything for item 9? There being no further.
Oh, Mr. Chairman?
Oh, I'm sorry, we do need to adopt a new mill rate. Mr. Bose, are you in a position to calculate that?
Just on the back of the napkin, but if we could do this at the special meeting that you call, I'd feel a little more comfortable.
There's no special meeting.
There is no special meeting.
Oh, you're not doing a
failed.
special meeting?
The
No.
tabling failed.
Well,
Mr. Chairman, may I
tabling-
suggest that we take a short little recess while Mr.
Thank
Bose
you.
can't
I appreciate that because I thought that went through. Thank you, Craig. I appreciate
All right, I call a recess.
Mr. Chairman, wait a minute. Don't we have to reduce the Board of Ed's, their budget?
Wasn't that
That's all part of
in
it.
the motion?
It's in there.
It's part of the motion?
It's in his
Okay, all right.
paperwork, yeah,
It's part of that motion, okay?
yeah.
Can you take a recess and give me 10, 15, 12?
We'll take a recess.
I'll make it 10.
Wouldn't it be the mill rate?
We are in recess.
No?
No, I wanted to just recalculate it.
Call the meeting back to order. Is there a motion on the mill rate?
Mr. Chairman, I move to set the mill rate of the 2018-2019 budget to 28.61 mils.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So early on in the budget process, Councilor Shortell, in doing his due diligence, reached out to Mr. Bose with asking how much money had to be cut from this budget in order to have a zero tax increase. The response was $3 million. So what happened tonight was there was an adjustment of $3,030,000, which exceeded the representation. What we have now before us is a very tiny, tiny tax increase. And I'll be voting in favor of it because I've met my duty. As far as I'm concerned, it is a zero tax increase. I would implore the administration to perhaps take, whatever out of contingency to get us there. But, I've worked as hard as I damn well could have on this. And I'm glad to see where we are. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else? Councilor Letourneau?
So, Mr. Bose, with the new calculation, what would the average tax?
Yeah, I calculated that as well, $8 based upon the average residential assessed parcel increase for the year.
Okay, and that represents overall, how much are we off to get to zero?
A couple, maybe 200,000, give or take.
200,000, okay. Well, maybe that money, the mayor could find that and take that and put it in so we could hit zero, but who knows?
Let's do that. Make a motion. Take it out of contingency.
Or can we do it right now?
No.
You want to do it now? Okay. I'd be happy to make a motion on that.
You can do it.
I wouldn't mess with it.
Really?
Yeah.
Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we take an additional $200,000 out of contingency to be applied so that we have a zero tax increase.
Second.
Whatever contingency they want to at this point.
I'm telling you, it requires a recommendation from the administrative branch. You're going beyond what will be acceptable. Just willy-nilly take $200,000 out of contingency. Not if we want to operate government and provide the services that everyone expects. Review what you're proposing thus far, but I can tell you right now, there's no way to take $200,000 out of contingency and have a budget that makes any sense.
So we'll take it out of the CRA funds. I mean, at a point you get not discouraged, but frustrated with fighting. We're supposed to work together on this.
And we should be working together, but you're working without any recommendation for the administrative branch. Don't tell me about working together. I walk in here tonight and hear all of this for the first time. The charter stands for what it stands for. It takes administrative and legislative branches. This legislative process is fast falling into a deep chasm that makes no sense. Hey, 200,000. What's that, chump change? 200,000, take it from anywhere. No, the budget is tight, and for a good reason. We don't waste money. So all of the expenses go up, salaries, fringe benefits, all of those things go up, but we're telling the public, you can have all that without any increase in your annual budget. Is there credibility to that? I say absolutely not. And if you want to see an example of how that works, take a look at the state government and the free fall it's in. We're depending upon $2.4 million more from the state government, and guess what? That is $2.4 million they took away from us in the current year. We're not getting new money. That's money we should have had in the current year. $3 million. So, you know, we start getting into this game of all the shells, which one does have the P under it? And I'm not going to be participating in that because the result is a disservice to the people who live in this town.
As is the, you know, I've been up here 9 years, and every year this body has raised taxes. And over those 9 years, I think we've added $10 million to reserves. So we talk about disservice, it's a double-edged sword. So I'm not just willy-nilly making a motion to take it out of contingency, but when Mr. Bose left the room, and up until, I mean, I would have done the work, I've spent a lot of time on this. So, I mean, if you want to take the money from somewhere else, that's fine. If I knew coming into the room, if Mr. Bose had given us a real number, I mean, it goes back to that communication thing. Councilor Shortell asked months ago, when the budget first came out, what do we need to reach? I not only met that number, but I exceeded it. And that's where I talk about working together. So, I mean, the motion...
No, that's not working together. That's arriving at a goal that you alone seem to have. And if you want to sacrifice services, you're on the right track. Because that's what's going to happen. That's if the administrative side recommends it. And we'll find out what the town attorney's office says about that issue. But this is not the typical budget process. This is one group deciding it's just going to do whatever it wants, regardless of what the charter or legal precedent or legal opinion says. That's working together? I don't think so.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion? Comments from the public? Oh, you. Come on up.
No, I just wanted to point out the fact that if we had a special meeting, we could have figured out the zero number in advance. That's all. No, I'm done. Go ahead.
All right, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
I have a question.
Okay.
So we're voting on the amendment, but we can still vote on the original? Okay.
It's a new motion to
We already voted on all that.
yeah, this is...
Yeah.
This is a new motion.
Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Adopting a mill rate and do a new
Right.
motion to change the budget again. That's what this motion is.
Well, the motion.
I assume,
This is an.
And the vote for the mill rate,
Chairman Cervoni, may I ask, I assume, are we voting on the motion from Councilor Fishbein right now?
that's my question.
Which I think we are.
Actually, that is a good point.
Right.
The motion was to amend the mill rate, or to set the mill rate, and that motion hadn't been voted upon, and therefore Councilor Fishbein's motion is out of order.
Okay.
No, it's an amendment to the...
No, it's not.
No,
It's not. You didn't vote to change the mill rate. You voted to take $200,000 out of contingency.
Correct.
We haven't
That's
accepted.
inconsistent with the motion.
No, because the effect of doing that would modify the mill rate.
Right. We haven't voted on the mill rate yet.
It's a different motion, and it's out of order.
So we'll vote on the mill rate.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, wait a second. No.
About wanting to work together.
I am.
Done something so.
No, because
What you want to accomplish.
listen.
All right, let's have some order to the meeting.
Still gotta push and push.
Let's have some order to the meeting.
The other side to do something I was against 3 times before, and I said, you know what, in the spirit of getting something good done, let's go along with this suggestion. We vote on it, and you still gotta pull this crap. Just let's finish.
If you gotta go home, go.
Sorry for blowing up.
I'm here doing my job. So,
All right, so your motion's out of order.
okay, and I'm challenging the ruling of the chair under Rule 24,
That's fine.
and that's procedurally what we would do. Yeah, appeal the decision of the chair that the motion is out of order, and so that's where we're at. Because the effect of my motion is to modify the mill rate, you can't do it afterwards. So, it's the same basic thing.
Okay. The vote on the appeal of the decision of the chair.
So you need a second.
Is there a second on the appeal of the decision of the chair? There's no second, that fails. We're voting on the mill rate,
We're voting on the mill rate that the comptroller
calculated.
Move to set the mill rate to 28.61 mils. Okey doke?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Fishbein,
No.
Laffin,
Yes.
Letourneau,
Yes.
Marone,
Yes.
Morgenstein,
Yes.
Shortell,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni.
Yes.
The motion passes.
There being no further business on the agenda, a motion to adjourn is in order.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, I declare the meeting adjourned.